All right, you got Wacko Bob here, and going live here one more time. We'll see how it goes early in the morning like this. I was going through some videos. On YouTube, and I noticed a lot of things. When it came down to it. I was actually checking out Marciano versus Ali, going through it all, what would make the fight happen and whatnot, and what it was going through at the time. And I know what people were saying. They wanted to talk about when they were more at their best and whatnot. And I understand where people were coming from with it. That really think the computer got it wrong when they did do the what was called the super fight between those two with a computer, and you were basically able to get Marciano, who got himself looking better than ever, or as best as he could, to be in the young Rocky Marciano with a young Muhammad Ali. And there's just some things I think that were missed, even by the boxing experts, the historians, and other people that really have talked about it that I've seen here on YouTube and whatnot. And I gotta be honest here with you, and I'm hoping people do check this out as I am doing this now. I don't know if I'll get too many people live, but they will see the archive of this. And I know I'm going to get a lot of flack from a lot of people for this, but I'm trying to be as fair as possible about this, because a lot of people think it wouldn't have been much of a match between Marciano and Ali in favor of Ali, and I think some people miss some points here. There's a lot of points that are missed here, and I was listening to one person who has that does a little podcast on YouTube. Good guy, and he makes a lot of points. I respect his opinion, and I got nothing bad to say about him. But the whole point is, who would win in a match between Ali and Marciano with them at their best? And I know the points that were made, about what Ali did against Joe Frazier, and what Ali did, against Foreman and against people like that were the ultimate punchers, like a Marciano was. But I think that there's a big miss that people don't understand in this one, and this one really goes against. This one really goes against. Oh boy, I should have just turned off Facebook notifications. Oh well, I don't care. I'm wacko. But there are those points that are really, really missed. And I agree with a lot of what people said with Ali's speed and whatnot. But I think a little bit too much has been put on Ali. Ali was very, very revolutionary. I mean, and I know Marciano in 1966 talked about his popularity dropping when he refused to, when he wasn't going to enter the draft and whatnot and go to war, and refused to come forward for it. And what happened there, what his stance was at that time. Unfortunately, he did become more popular than anything else, but I think that there's a lot of misses that people miss when it comes to Marciano, and that were brought up even when you saw the documentary of the movie when they talked about it, for those who got it on DVD, is the fact that there are things Marciano could do that a Frazier couldn't do, that a Foreman couldn't do, and that a Sonny Liston couldn't do. And how do you talk about Marciano not being able to knock out a Muhammad Ali? He was knocked down by Henry Cooper, who respect enough for him. I mean, I think that there is more than enough respect. Let me just take care of one thing here, and and I'll definitely keep us going here. I apologize for that. Now I can get back on here. I just again, there are some points and some real misses that people have made in this one, because if Ali had a tough time with a Joe Frazier, who really only had one punch, which was his left hook. He was a tough puncher, but it was that one punch that he always relied on. How would he do against a guy like Marciano, who was just as strong? He may not have been just as big. He was just as strong. And okay, very good to know. He was just as strong, and and whatnot. So there's a lot. This isn't the people's fault here, just so everyone understands. I'm still doing this. I do apologize. I'm just trying to make it to where everyone can see what I'm doing here. But he only had one punch. Henry Cooper was a tough one himself, but he was not in the same caliber of a Sonny Liston or a Rocky Marciano. Rocky Marciano was in a better category of the great heavyweights than a Sonny Liston, and that's not a knock on Sonny Liston. It's not a knock on Sonny Liston at all. So I mean, it's but there is that point of interest that I think we do need to look at when it comes down to it with all this. And I know I'm going to get a lot of flack between the people who are watching this live and the people that'll see this later on. So, I mean, just to update people so they know and they understand, there is a certain point that I think we really need to look at here with this. And, the big one are those 2 points alone. Sonny Liston was a puncher. He was a puncher. He knew how to knock someone out. And normally did it early. But here's the thing. If Henry Cooper was not on the same level, is not on the same level as Rocky Marciano, how would Ali be able to fight Marciano? If George Foreman was only known for being a clubber with punches that wore himself out, and if he didn't knock someone out within 6 rounds, Foreman would be worn out. What are you going to do? Neither one of these two guys had the adrenaline and the resilience of that of a Rocky Marciano. And Joe Frazier only had, and this is a third one, only had, really, he was a puncher, but he had one punch he relied on, which was that left hook. And Rocky Marciano gets underestimated, in my opinion. In my opinion of this one. And this is where I almost agree with the computer to a certain extent. To a certain extent. Because Rocky Marciano was a guy who, just like a George Foreman, is going to get a guy up against the ropes and he's going to find somewhere to punch him. Where Foreman was just a clubber, he was that was more George Foreman at the time. He was not the fighter that he was when he saw the old George Foreman, the old 45-year-old George Foreman go out and win the world title. I mean, George Foreman, if George Foreman had more of that conservability and the way he did ultimately become a fighter, then probably would have been a different type of match. And George Foreman's a very, very humble guy. He admits when he gets beat. He admits the Joe Frazier he went up against. If he went up against him before he went up against Ali, with the way Joe Frazier was training, Joe Frazier would have probably made it a much different fight. But Joe Frazier wasn't the same fighter after the fight he had with Ali. And I know Ali can come back. I know Ali has his strengths. But let's also consider a couple of things here, too, with Rocky Marciano that people miss. Rocky Marciano was a puncher himself. He could club like Foreman, but he had a hell of a lot more adrenaline and endurance than George Foreman had. He had a lot more. He was also faster than George Foreman. And he could also take a punch a lot better than George Foreman. So you're not going to see a Marciano wear down so fast. You also saw, and before people talk about what happened when he faced the Archie Moores of the world, yeah, Archie Moore was probably at the time the best heavyweight you could ask for. And truthfully, I think Marciano should have stayed in the ring for another year to a year and a half and had at least 2 or 3 more fights. A rematch with Archie Moore to prove himself and be ready to fight a Sonny Liston who would have been ready. And if Marciano won those, then he would have had his spot, a better spot in boxing history that you can't play politics with. Marciano fought the best fighters out there. If Marciano actually started maybe 3 years earlier in his career and didn't start his pro career at 23, it would have been different. It would have been different. I still think he would have won because of the type of fighter that Marciano was. Rocky Marciano, people got to remember, he was always in shape, and he was always ready to fight someone. I mean, Ali, yeah, Ali's going to rely more on his speed. He's going to rely more on his speed. But you got a guy, Marciano, and Marciano was a type of fighter that knew how to punch, that even if he was going to hit your shoulders or your arms, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel it. And, as much as people want to say that really shouldn't count, it still goes in punch stats. And Marciano was one of those rare fighters that where if he hits him there, it's going to hurt. And that's going to reduce the power and the snap behind the type of jabs that an Ali would do. It would only take one time for Marciano to go in there to start reducing it. And that's what people miss. Yeah, Marciano was a bleeder, and he would be busted open. He'd probably be busted open on his eye, under his eye, over his eye, on both sides. And maybe off on the side too. At least on one side. And you'd worry about that. And you could maybe say a technical knockout. But I kind of agree with what the computer said. I mean, Ali got knocked down Marciano once. Marciano knocked down Ali 3 times. And here's the thing. Again, Joe Frazier relied on one punch. Marciano had a bunch of punches he could rely on. I mean, when he hit you in the arms, it counts. And that's going to reduce the power and anything else and the speed of Ali to throw his punches just on that alone, because that's going to hurt. And I think people miss that point. I think people miss the point that when you look at the rope-a-dope with George Foreman, Foreman was slow, and Foreman would do things. Marciano was a little more conservative than Foreman, and like I said, he would still do things, but he'd be quick, bam, 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 in the arms. Where if you're going to see an Ali block those punches, he's going to feel it in his arms and his shoulders. Because that's what he does. And when he finds that opening, it counts. It counts for something. That's something Foreman couldn't do. This is where I agree with the computer to a certain extent. I think if you were to get things with the technology today, to do it with the most advanced system, because you had the most advanced system doing it in 1969. If you could celebrate 50 years of that come 2019 and totally redo the entire computer, I think a radio broadcast would be more accurate than trying to get all the technology together so people could see it. It would still look like a cartoon fight, like Paulie said in Rocky Balboa. I mean, it would be more different. But if you look at the situation, I think people put too much emphasis on Ali. Well, he was able to fight Frazier. He was able to fight Foreman. He got knocked down and came back with Cooper. He was able to fight Sonny Liston. I don't think any of these fighters were of the same caliber of a Marciano. Like I said, Frazier had one punch he relied on. And really, to me, when it came down to the Thrill in Manila, which was to me the greatest Ali fight of all time, and Frazier's greatest fight of all time, if you let Frazier go back out there, if his trainer Eddie Fudge looked over on the other side and saw Ali, he would have probably seen that Ali was already worn out. Ali was out of steam. And that if Foreman could manage, if you could get Foreman alert enough, Frazier alert enough, he could find that opening. He says, don't throw your punches. Have Ali come after you, and if Ali's guard's down, you get those punches in. Punch him in the, get him in the gut, and then get him a few times in the head. And if you can get that hook in, you get it in, because truthfully, whoever was going to win that round was going to win the fight, whether it be by knockout or by simply winning that round. It was that even. Truthfully, I think Ali would have had a much tougher time with a Marciano than he did with a George Foreman, a Joe Frazier, a Sonny Liston, a Henry Cooper. I just think that way. Even a Ken Norton. Ken Norton, I have to admit to one thing. George Foreman owned a Joe Frazier and a Ken Norton. Ali had his trouble with them. But this is where styles come in. And as much as Marciano had a puncher's style, he also knew he had to change up that puncher's chance from time to time. And that's where, again, people underestimate him. You're not going to get away with a rope-a-dope on a Rocky Marciano. You're not going to get away with just thinking Marciano only has one punch. And you're not going to think that you're blocking so you don't get hit in the body is not going to affect you, because it is going to affect your arms and your shoulders. And that's going to reduce Ali to how much damage he could do to put any sort of power or any sort of speed behind his own punches. So, do I think the computer had it right? To a certain extent, I do. I would like to see it done more with the technology today. If they had the technology back then, number one, they would have just simply had them when they were at their best. And they would have tried seeing what Ali had of his style before his exile that he still had when he got into Ali after his exile. And I just think, and this is where I gotta say it, if Ali had a tough time fighting a Joe Frazier, imagine what a Marciano could do, because I just think Marciano was that better fighter. The only thing Marciano would have to worry about is the cuts, because they have the 13th round knockout of Ali on Marciano, and the alternate ending showed that 13th round being a TKO with Marciano losing on cuts. And all they did was, just so people understand, all they did was change that last round, that 13th round, and that was it. They didn't do anything else. So you got to understand that end of it. This is where people need to know that I think Marciano is a little bit underrated where this goes, because Marciano knew he had to change the way he was going to punch someone and fight him. He was not your boxer. He really wasn't the boxer. To me, the best boxer and puncher that was a great boxer and great puncher and a great tactician in the ring was Joe Louis. You know, and I just think they relied too much on Muhammad Ali's speed to do more of the work. And yeah, it can, but Ali never had to face a tactician like a Joe Louis. He never had to face someone who was just as accomplished as a boxer as he was as a puncher. And I think those things have to play a fact. You know, and I think if you looked at Ali, if you take both of his peaks before and after his exile and you put them together, I still think you're going to have a problem against, you know, a Rocky Marciano. So I'm not going to say that it would be no contest and Ali would win. A lot of people say that, including the one who wrote Marciano's biography about him, saying the computer got it wrong. I just don't think, even for the millions that you could put into data to the greatest computer system you had in the world, would get it right like you would if you were to do that today. If you can get the promoters and any of the championship committees together to redo that fight, first to do a whole radio tournament because you got about 32 great world champions you could get. There's even some that you skipped. And I wouldn't just simply do a tournament to do the best. I would sometimes just do the dream fights and just see how much you could get to a reality of how Marciano and Ali would be when they're at their best. I still think Marciano could knock Ali out. I really do. And I'm not knocking Ali. Is Ali the greatest of all time? Yeah. And don't take my word for it, you know. I mean, I could be wrong. If you could get as much of the human element into those two into a computer, it could really go any way. But I just don't think Ali would go up against a puncher who's going to go in there and that could go in there and fight against you from round 1 to, at that time, round 15. I just don't. Even if you were to get judges, and you could get it as close as you can with the technology today. Let's see them do a whole with the way they redo movies. Let's celebrate 50 years ago that it happened and have a whole rebroadcast done of this one. Have the whole radio feel to it, because that could get more accuracy than anything else. Anything else, you know, with just commentary behind it, you know, with what people can see. I love listening to the tournament, because the tournament's on the DVD extras of how it happened. I mean, you know, do I agree with a lot of it? No, I don't. Because truthfully, I don't think a Jack Dempsey could knock out a Joe Louis. And I was kind of upset to hear about that one. I do have my issues with Ali losing to Jim Jeffries, but, you know, they're talking, you know, because he talks about coming from the Jack Johnson era, and Jack Johnson was in the best shape of his career and best shape of his life, going up against a Jim Jeffries that going up against a Jim Jeffries that basically was past his prime and had to get himself in shape just for one fight. So you were looking for this tough guy to go up against a boxer. And a very strong boxer on top of it. And that's what you got to understand. Ali was going up against Jim Jeffries. Jim Jeffries when he was at his best, when he was a ballroom brawler. I still got my issues with it because as much as Ali may not have fought someone that was the brawler that Jim Jeffries was, Jim Jeffries never fought the guy of style and finesse like an Ali would. So I got my issue with that one. I agree. But I mean, like I said, don't take me as telling the truth that I'm saying Marciano could kill Muhammad Ali. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying my feeling is I think Marciano is a lot more underestimated than people will give him credit for, because I think, I do think that a Marciano could win. Marciano would be too underestimated. He's faster than Joe Frazier, faster than George Foreman, has more adrenaline than a George Foreman does, has more endurance than a George Foreman did. And he's faster than them both. He has more punches than Joe Frazier had that he could rely on. I mean, and he knew when he had to look for the opening and know where patterns were right there to do what he wanted to do against a guy like an Ali. Talk all you want to about Muhammad Ali, and I agree with you, Mark. Talk about what you want to, but don't underestimate Rocky Marciano. Now, I will say this. There were some politics, I think, involved in that tournament, and even with the computer. Even with the whole computer thing of them doing 72 one-minute rounds in the span of a few days. I do think there are issues there. And why do I say that? I say that because of the fact that I think the politics played a game, and Rocky Marciano was retired undefeated. He was going to attempt a comeback, but ultimately decided not to. But he retired undefeated. He retired the champ. He retired on top. And it's kind of tough to try to go in there and destroy that legend. I know other people have done computer matches where Marciano lost to Sonny Liston and Marciano lost to Joe Frazier. Those are wrong. Those are wrong, in my opinion. I think you underestimate him, and I think sometimes Ali is a little more overestimated. Ali never fought a Joe Louis. And they had Joe Louis and Muhammad Ali always at the end, and most of them had Ali winning. I mean, I would say maybe not do a tournament, just do dream matches. Like, how would Primo Carnera do going up against a guy like a Jess Willard? How would that go? How would a boxer like a Jim Braddock go up against a boxer like an Evander Holyfield? That would be fun to see. And ultimately, have the super fight again of Marciano and Ali. And that would be the only one that I would put everything into. If the tournament itself would be a success for radio, then put all the money you can into the dream matches. But you want most of your money, or more money, to go into making sure you can get it accurate and right between Ali and Marciano. But you also got to be looking for people. It's like promoters today. Can you find anyone that could do it without any partisan interest? That's the thing you got to worry about. I respect Ali. Ali was a great champion. He's one of the greatest. But he was the greatest more because he was a showman. And I got nothing bad to say about Ali. And yes, he was a great fighter. Absolutely. But I just don't think he could have fought a guy like a Joe Louis or a Marciano like he did there. Or even a Gene Tunney for that matter, because Gene Tunney knew that style. Gene Tunney was a great puncher, a great boxer, and a great tactician himself. So I think you got to look at those things. I think a Muhammad Ali could beat a Max Schmeling. I think he could beat a Max Baer. I think he could even really get away with defeating a Jim Braddock too. So Jersey Joe Walcott, Ezra Charles. I think Ali could beat those guys. He's already proven he could beat a Foreman. He's already proven he could beat a Ken Norton, even though the third fight between them was very controversial. It's about what he could do. How would a young Muhammad Ali have done against a young in his prime Larry Holmes, instead of being the old Ali that did whatever he could just to get himself in shape for another fight? I mean, how would that have been? Because Larry Holmes could have easily destroyed Ali, and he refused to, because that was someone who he loved and he respected for so many years, and he was a sparring partner too. He didn't want to. He knew what was wrong with Ali and wouldn't go for the kill on him. But how would it work if he was just another fighter to a Larry Holmes against a young Ali? Ali would probably win, but it would probably be a great fight, because Larry Holmes was known for having one of the best jabs in the business, and you got Ali who would use that jab too. But Ali, I think, would come with a hook a lot faster than Larry Holmes would. Or rather crosses, I should say, than jabs. So, I mean, you got those variables you got to look at. I think Larry Holmes maybe would have had a better uppercut. But, these are just the things you got to look at. I mean, but do the tournament right if you're going to do it. Get all your champions. And that's all I'll say there. That's all I'll say there. Marvin Hart wasn't in there. Tommy Burns wasn't in that tournament when they did it. Ezra Charles wasn't in there. I mean, but you had Jack Sharkey in there. You had Max Schmeling in there, who really was a champion himself. I'm not going to say he was a pushover, but he'll be known more for his knockout of Joe Louis than he was for his title reign. Reasons there, of course, he won the title while disqualified, and he lost himself. He lost the tournament to become the champion by disqualification. But I think people know where I'm coming from with this now. I think people know where I'm coming from, and that's all I'm going to say. That's all I'll say there. I mean, it's my thoughts only on this one. I know a lot of people, when they do see this, they'll have their thoughts. I mean, I'm probably going to get hit hard for it, but I think people would underestimate Rocky Marciano a little too much, and I think they put too much on Ali. And I'm not knocking Ali. I would never knock Ali. If I were to put him above anybody of who he can't beat because of how his track record is, Joe Louis. He can't beat, and that's a definite. And he probably couldn't beat Marciano. And the only other ones I could really think of that he would have a hard time with would be a Gene Tunney and a Jim Corbett and a Bob Fitzsimmons, because they come from more of a style and finesse for white guys. But Ali in the end too. If you look at Ali in the end, he said race didn't matter. Race didn't matter for who was going to be the better one. It's about the heart and soul that matters, and that's the truth. And I think even if Ali were still alive and healthy today, Ali, I think himself would even be, as much as he would talk about himself being the greatest, he would not downplay what any of these fighters before him and after him were like. So you got to look at that. I mean, just it's a lot different. There's a lot more to it. A lot of people look at Mike Tyson and they downplay him. They said, all these guys would have knocked out Mike Tyson given the way he was. But let's not forget the Mike Tyson that was trained by Customato before Jimmy Jacobs passed away too. Because the Jimmy Jacobs, Bill Caton, Kevin Rooney era of Mike Tyson, that was Mike Tyson at his best. Not the Mike Tyson people saw after, and people got to remember that too. But that's the way I feel. Anyways, that's my story. For those that did come and take some time to see me live here, great. I know it's early in the morning and people couldn't, but for those of you that are listening to me in archive, I love you guys. And yes, I will be bringing my show back very soon. So with that being said, thank you for listening. I will talk to everyone later on. And I'll come back with some more YouTubes and Facebook Lives. This one was more exclusive to YouTube. My Facebook followers know it. So, that's all I'll say. That's all I'll say. I just think Rocky Marciano, I think the computer to one extent had it right. And I think you would be going into that 13th round knowing that either it's going to be a TKO on cuts or it's going to be a knockout in Marciano's favor. Again, and I make this point, Ali never fought someone with the endurance, the stamina, the power to have more than one punch, and the power to even be as quick as a Marciano was. So you could talk about all the reach advantages all you want to. That's just the way it is. And it would be a fairly even fight between the two of them. It really would be. I just think because of the puncher's chance, Marciano could really come out and win. But there would be a rematch. All right, thank you.